For today's webinar, we have Dr. Kristen Feedback from ComCare, Angie Jones from the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, and Jessica Domi from the Kansas Office of the Attorney General presenting pandemic impacts in the workplace, employee wellness, returning to the office, and remote testimony. Without further delay, here's Dr. Feedback, Angie, and Jessica.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Kristen Feedback. I am the President and CEO of ComCare, and today I will be talking about post-pandemic, the personnel issues facing the workforce. The learning objectives that I have is I would like people to walk away knowing and able to identify the personnel issues that can occur while making changes in an employee's work location, whether it's home or office or both. Also equipping learners with the strategies to utilize in dealing with employees that are having to make changes in work locations. And then lastly, giving a learner an idea of how to develop a policy and procedure surrounding personnel challenges to assist in providing a workplace environment that is fair and consistent, and also that engages employees. So next, I'm going to talk about personnel issues and dealing with work locations. This is something that I experienced myself working at the hospital and having a variety of different employees in different roles. And so I wanted to just cover some of those issues. So the first one's going to be resistance. Sometimes employees may resist or not agree with an employer's decision of what work location is important for their role. Secondly, safety for employees. As we bring people into the office or require them to work certain days in the office and then also at home, we also have to consider the number of COVID cases as an employer, and that varies. And also dealing with the challenges in making employees feel safe if they come into the work office. Vaccinated and unvaccinated employees, I know that sometimes employers are faced with the decision that they have to make, or they are actually required to mandate the vaccine, while some of their employees do not want to get vaccinated. Accommodations, employees are finding ways to seek accommodations to stay at home instead of coming into the office, and that can also produce some challenges for the rest of the employees that don't have the accommodations that they would like. Lastly is workforce issues. Recruiting and retaining employees can be very challenging right now, especially in the current market, with some employers offering exclusive remote working and also requiring part-time and full-time on-site working. These two situations, it may be difficult to hire and keep employees for certain employers. I went ahead, and this is something that you can reflect on back, but just basically found this quote from SHRM, the SHRM organization, of a CEO that is facing the challenges of bringing people back working remotely and also bringing them back into the office. And I just thought that was really interesting about the varying of opinions that employees have when it comes to coming back to the office or staying at home. And so I would just ask that you reflect on that slide later. When I looked and researched at the different things that employers were focusing on in trying to make this decision of work locations, I found some surveys, and I thought it was very beneficial to bring those up. The first survey that I looked at, survey number 1, is based on a survey of more than 500 participants from companies of all sizes. And so what the survey found, and these were things that remote employees missed about coming into the office. One is that in-person workplace conversations. 61% of the 500 said that they missed those. Second, the regular and daily structure of reporting to a work site. 42% of those working at home missed that of not being able to have that when they did come into the work site. Lunches and happy hours with colleagues, 40% missed those occurrences. And then lastly, reduced interruptions by kids during the workday, 37%. So employees also like the convenience of being at the work site with ease to technology issues, because sometimes when you're fully relying on technology, there can become issues with that, and you can readily have the resources available to solve those issues. Also, just supplies in general. And they found that when they're in the workplace, these issues can be remedied faster and with better results. The second survey that was I found was surrounding people that are satisfied with working at home, enjoy being at home. And so in a survey of 1,000 people that work fully remotely and part-time remotely, about 2/3 of these workers say that they're worried about the transition of coming back into the office. And as many as 29% value the flexibility and the safety of remote working. So much so that they actually say that if they're made to come back into the office, that they are going to quit or insist that their employers make it to where they can't come back. So just 2 surveys I just wanted to show some attention to. So let's kind of look at some of the advantages and challenges of working remotely. The first one would be in terms of opportunities. Working remotely provides a more flexible schedule. It can perpetuate a good work-life balance. Less office distractions can occur, which also can then cause an increase in productivity. Less commute time in the car. And I really wanted to highlight, a lot of people, especially with gas prices rising right now, savings in time, but money, of course. A reduction of fear of having to be in close contact with coworkers, reducing the spread of the virus. Getting to wear sweats or PJs all day at home. I know that was a couple of comments that I heard from staff as I'm having them come back in the office that they miss that. And then lastly, some of the frustrations that they may have in working with certain coworkers. Some of that was relieved by working from home. So some of the challenges is, first of all, decreased hours spent engaging socially with work friends and colleagues. So a lot of times when we talk about challenges, and you'll notice this throughout as I'm speaking more about them, it really focuses on connectedness and also socialization, okay? Secondly, a loss of encouragement, socialization, development, and support for employees. A decrease in quick connectiveness, networking, and collaboration. Employees feel disconnected from the organization and other fellow coworkers. There can also be more pressure on managers to ensure that the organizational culture, values, and expectations are fostering relationship building. Something else that can kind of happen is when unintentionally a supervisor or another coworker can forget some other employees because it's kind of that out of sight, out of mind, causing employees to feel like they are not included. And then lastly, anecdotal evidence that remote working can be too distracting and doesn't support creativity. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about working advantages in working in the office. So in regard to opportunities, being able to connect and socially interact with coworkers, provide an opportunity of face-to-face engagement that can provide encouragement and support to employees, the ability to provide connectiveness, networking, and collaboration among employees, more opportunities for employees to feel inclusive in meetings, events, and impromptu conversations. Being in the office also helps establish a routine for employees with less distractions that can occur in a household. Easier for supervisors to interact and monitor activities of employees during work hours, and it also assists an organization to help cultivate a culture of creativity and relationship building among employees. Some of the challenges of coming back into the office is employees are faced with increased commute time and also expenses that an employee may occur when coming into the office. More distractions due to employees stating like they start office hopping and starting conversations when employees are trying to work. The same work that can be completed at home can also be completed at work. So those are some of the challenges with coming back into the office. I wanted to highlight in the next slide about how organizations can support supervisors through the changes in work locations. First, an organization needs to support supervisors by understanding what the supervisors care about. So our supervisors are the ones that are working with our employees, and it's really important that if the employees are relaying that they are concerned about coming in because they have high-risk family members or they have their own health issues or childcare issues, that's something that an organization can kind of help a supervisor find ways of being supportive to their employees. Second, determine if supervisors' concerns are personal. So it's really important as a supervisor that we remain objective in our feelings, whether we feel it's better to come back to work or to stay at home, that we remain objective, especially when we're listening to our employees. Third is to highlight the engagement of all employees. wherever they are working. Encourage supervisors to recognize when employees engage in, like, for example, the community or on behalf of the organization. For example, if an employee volunteers in a touchless food bank or heads an organizational project remotely, encourage supervisors to acknowledge employees that are committed to the organization and its goals. Next is emphasize habits that make things seem as normal as possible. So if the goal is to bring people back in the office or remain remote, we really need to, some of the ways in which we establish routines with our employees, we need to maintain those virtually as well. So for example, if we would meet employees for coffee a lot, then we need to encourage virtual coffee meetings. Lastly, encourage supervisors to maintain routine and good communication with their employees. And this basically starts with a question to your employees. Encourage supervisors to ask their employees, what's the best mode of communication with you and how frequent should I be communicating with you? Considerations when making changes. There's really no roadmap or true guidance of how to transition employees back into an office, keeping them at home, or developing a hybrid program. So the most important consideration is to figure out how to get employee buy-in when you are going to make a change in work locations. So the organization really needs to focus on the implementation and communication to employees. It's important that they're transparent and open with managers and employees about all plans in regard to bringing employees back, keeping them at home, or even developing a hybrid program. And that communication really needs to be facilitated prior to implementation. There needs to be, when deciding in an organization what employees to bring back, because sometimes based on an employee's role, it may make more sense for them to work remotely, while other employees within the organization, it doesn't make sense. So an employer really needs to focus on the employee's role and the function versus their seniority, because you don't want to make an employee feel less or more valued. Employees need to trust the organization's policies, and employees need to feel a part of the process. Allow program directors or supervisors to help communicate the decision from the organization and help with implementation, and allow for the employee feedback when possible. And that's from an ad in the Venture Bee magazine. So if an employer decides to bring employees back into the office, these are some considerations that need to be taken. First is start focusing on the positives that can come from working in the office. Encourage employees to look closely at the benefits of rebuilding their social connections, maybe that they once had with their coworkers, the fact that they may have a reduction in loneliness and reducing distractions from home, and establishing better boundaries between work and home life. As employees, think of connecting with a big group of coworkers. When you think about that, it can be overwhelming. So encourage employees to kind of start interacting with a small group of coworkers and then have them build up to interacting with an entire team. Encourage employees to figure out what feels comfortable and practice safety precautions. And the reason why I mention this is because it's really important if the employee comes back into the office and feels unsafe about social boundaries, that they have a plan coming into the office and they get an opportunity to share that with their supervisors. They may not feel comfortable shaking somebody's hand or getting within 6 feet of somebody. So it's really important that an employee feels comfortable at relaying that to their supervisor, and their supervisor make that a possibility for the employee. Practice healthy self-care. So as an organization, we really need to encourage that. So we need to work on helping our employees establish routines, encourage within a workday schedule that employee schedules timely meals and breaks as allowed, continue to get plenty of rest, and then allow for relaxation upon getting home. And then lastly is encourage your employees to stock their desks with items that can reduce stress, such as stress balls, diffusers, and even adding some personal effects. Make sure to have a comfortable chair or an ergonomic desk if needed to ensure that the employees are maintaining good posture while at the office. So lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about the policies and procedures if your organization is going to go into a hybrid program or currently have people that are exclusively working remotely. So my recommendations is every organization needs to have a policy that specifies a hybrid program and or a work from home procedure. And then that needs to be accompanied with an agreement that the employee and the supervisor sign. So when talking about the policy, it's really important that the policy outlines employees are to work all scheduled hours, meals and breaks in accordance to their hours listed on their job description or requirements. The policy needs to emphasize that employees are to be working and available to all organizational staff during their office hours. And that's really within reason. For example, depending on what kind of messaging system you have, sometimes there might be a message from a worker that, hey, I'm going to take an hour for lunch, just so if any of the employees do try to contact that person, they know that they're at lunch or they're taking a break or what have you. So that's really important. Also, the equipment that an employee needs or is issued to successfully conduct the duties and responsibilities of their job description, that also needs to be in the policy. And then lastly, there needs to be a statement that acknowledges the working from home is a privilege, and at any time a supervisor can request an employee to come back into the office, and this excludes those with an accommodation. So in regard to establishing a policy, like I said, an agreement needs to be accompanied with that. So the agreement needs to include employee scheduled days and hours, the equipment that was issued to the employee, and then each agreement needs to be signed by their supervisor and the employee. I have included an example on this next slide of a hybrid policy. This is actually something that I initiated at the place where I currently work. And so I went ahead and copied it, but then I, instead of including my work name, I went ahead and just put company name so anybody can copy and paste or whatever. But this was some guidance that I got from an HR consultant that I typically use. And so you can see that in this policy, it outlines what the hybrid policy is, what the work from home time means, how an agreement is going to be submitted, and the cost and the security considerations, also expectations. And then lastly, I went ahead and included a copy of a work from home agreement. And this is something that I encourage, again, people that are hybrid or people that are working from home, that this agreement goes into their personnel file. And it's an agreement that is well communicated, and that all employees, when they sign that, and the supervisor, they understand exactly what those expectations are. So. Okay, well, I just want to thank you all for your time. And if you have any questions, please contact me. I've included my email address. And so I check that regularly. That's my work email. And thanks again for your time. I will go ahead and turn it over to Mrs. Jones.
All right, well, good afternoon. My name is Angie Jones, and I'm an assistant special agent in charge with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. The KBI is made up of an investigative branch, the records division, and then we have our forensic science building in our headquarters in Topeka, with remote locations also in 2 places in the state of Kansas. So in 2007, I helped coordinate and start our peer support program, which I helped run as a collateral duty along with being an agent. But in 2020, when the pandemic began, our director said, what good's a pandemic if we can't get something out of it? So I was promoted to wellness coordinator, and we didn't know what that would look like. And the last 2 years have definitely been a learning curve, and definitely an appropriate time for us to incorporate wellness at a higher level within our agency. So what happened when the pandemic began? Just like 9/11, that changed the nature of our global security. But the same thing with this pandemic, we're going to have long-lasting impact on the healthcare management within our facilities. And so that is definitely going to impact each and every forensic science lab and any type of employee situation. We've gone from full-time in the office in the lab to working from home as much as we can, to a hybrid schedule. And now are we returning to the office, but is that full-time or part-time? We've been worried about sniffles and cleaning solutions and air quality and changing policies. But what's happened is we've had changes in our mental health and our physical health, and our employees are expecting something different from us. So Dr. Feedback already addressed most of these personal advantages and disadvantages from working from home, so I don't feel like I need to go back over them. The only thing I want to add to that is that what we're seeing that's really impacting symptomology during this extended pandemic time is the decrease in physical movement. And that is causing a lot of physical problems within our folks. And the increased screen time is also causing physical disadvantages. What we know is that our folks that are working from home are reporting increased depressive and anxiety feelings. And these feelings are leading to changes in their physical activity, their food intake, and they're experiencing more physical issues from poor body mechanics and poor workstations. I've kind of joked with my boss that when we return back to the office, we're going to have to offer Weight Watchers and some things like that, because working from home has definitely caused us to change how we're eating and how we're moving. When we look at some of the research, we know that about 73% of us have adjusted our work hours, and about a third of those are adjusting it around the people in our home. So we have family members working from home, we have kiddos in and out of our space, and that is actually reducing our mental well-being. We're working longer days, about 48 and a half minutes is the average, and we're increasing our meetings by almost 13%. So what is this doing to us mentally and for our well-being physically? 2/3 of people surveyed are saying that they have new physical health issues post-pandemic. 75% of us are saying we have new mental health issues post-pandemic. And half of those are saying they have 2 or more symptoms of mental health issues. And what's interesting is we're seeing females reporting this at a higher level. And the research isn't showing us the cause of that, but what is speculated is that females tend to have a more traditional role in the home at times. And so they're also responsible for the household chores, the activities. And if you add kids to the mix, that doubles their pressure, and then possibly having to assist with homeschooling. And so the sad part that goes along with that is our females are also reporting they're not comfortable talking to their administration and their supervisors about taking mental health days. A lot of agencies haven't designated that you can use sick leave for mental health, so that's something that's definitely encouraged. The research is showing that our burnout rate has skyrocketed. We've gone up 30% self-report burnout since pre-pandemic. 72% of our employees are reporting that they're burned out by their job. So working from home just didn't cause issues for our employees, but it also caused issues for our agency. When our employees and our divisions and the disciplines within it are not created equal, we have this scheduling equity problem. So our employees are working from home, and some have easily 8 hours of work to do, but some don't. And so the person that has 4 to 6 hours of work still has to be available, but they get to enjoy time with their family or cook dinner or, clean the house. And so that's causing conflict between employees and relationships between supervisors and administration, therefore affecting the agency. When we're bringing new people on to train within this extended period from home time, virtual training may not be exactly what they need in a laboratory setting. And they're definitely not being able to interact with their peers. And so when we're talking about returning back to the workplace, we really need to consider that this person is going to feel like a stranger going in, and they're probably going to be treated as a stranger because there hasn't been a lot of opportunity to socialize them with their peers. And we definitely have to remember that the training curve is going to be different for somebody learning in this environment than learning full-time, 8-hour-a-day setting in a laboratory. Obviously, communication has been impacted by the pandemic, because when I walk up to your cube and have a conversation with you, you can see my face and you can hear the intonation in my voice. But when I send you the same information on an email or a text, it can be interpreted differently. And again, this has caused employee conflict with supervision, and conflict with our administration and our agencies. So we definitely have to take those things into play when we're going back into the office. And lastly, well-being. It's very difficult for me as the wellness coordinator and any supervisor or any administrator to evaluate how our employees are doing when they're working from home or in a hybrid situation. Who thought that we would talk about workplace healthcare management, specifically in a forensic laboratory setting? But the last 2 years we've done that. We've talked about cleaning supplies and air quality systems, and do we need to consult with mental health? Do we need to consult with medical professionals? And so what we know is that employees have started talking about their mental health more, but they're not feeling like it's being supported by the agency, or they don't feel like this agency is giving them the right solutions. So that's something that we're going to need to address currently. Now things that are settling down a bit, and we're worrying, how are we going to get back into the office? Is it going to be normal, or do we try to go back to normal? I thought it was interesting when I read the CDC reports that businesses overall lose more than 200 million workdays a year due to depression. And that costs businesses as a whole $44 billion. So we know that that's impacting us in each of our agencies. So how are we going to deal with this? When people are reporting having symptoms of mental or physical health, how are we going to help them? They are coming back now post-pandemic with a need and an expectation that the agency is going to provide sustainable and mentally health workplaces. So when we look to the future, are we going to hire somebody within? Are we going to hire our own psychologist? Because right now, with the mental health epidemic that we have going on, to get someone from my agency to see someone that's culturally competent in this field, we're looking at sometimes a month to 6 weeks, and that's just unacceptable. We know that when employees are treated for their issues and the agency supports them, that 86% of employers in the CDC study saw an increase in work performance, and they saw 80% increase in job satisfaction. And that just brings better morale to the agency when people are feeling satisfied with their job. But the thing I like most about what the CDC said in this study was, isn't taking care of your employees just the right thing to do? And I totally agree with that. And so as the wellness coordinator, that's always my position when I'm speaking to my administration. If employees feel supported, they're less likely to call in sick, they're less likely to underperform, and they have a more positive view of us as leaders and as the agency as a whole. I've talked a lot about the employees, but our supervisors are struggling. About 1/3 of them have said that they are seeing changes in their mental health. Their symptoms are increasing, their mental health is declining. About half of them say they don't have the energy to do non-work activities that they used to do. They're reporting less sleep and less interest in socialization. In this culture as a whole, alcohol and substance abuse tends to be a way that we try to cope. And 1/3 of supervisors are reporting an increase in alcohol and substance abuse. Another, not so much a joke, but another thing that I've mentioned to my boss is that along with Weight Watchers, we might want to start incorporating an AA meeting in the agency, because alcohol has been a way people have coped with the pandemic, especially with additional time at home. So it's really difficult for our supervisors to feel vulnerable in front of their employees. But as employers, we're asking our employees to feel vulnerable, and we're asking them to talk to us about their mental health and their physical concerns. And if our supervisors aren't able to do that, and we're not training them to be transparent with their folks, we're never going to have that effect in our employees. And so returning back to work, 44% of leaders are reporting that they are experiencing a decline in morale within their divisions. And so they're feeling overwhelmed, and this feeling of responsibility is definitely adding to their mental health struggles. So we know there's been some positive impacts from the pandemic. We can still work from home and be productive. And as much as I dislike technology, it's definitely forced us to move forward and learn how to do things differently and show that there are ways to do that well. And most important for me, it's just brought the mental health aspect of our work to light, and it's normalized challenges at work more so. But is it to where it needs to be? Absolutely not. So how are we going to change things in the future? We need to consider how our employees going to be impacted from physical issues from working from home. How are they going to be impacted by possibly long-term COVID or possibly side effects of the vaccination? We need to have plans in place to address these medical conditions or challenges that might come up for our employees. And risk advisors are saying the realization of physical and mental symptoms during the pandemic are expected to be the primary productivity disruptor for this upcoming year. And so I challenge you as administrators and lab directors and supervisors to really consider that when you're doing your evaluations, when you're evaluating divisions and their numbers. It might not be productivity issues because of poor work environment or poor employees. It might be that they're still experiencing these lasting effects from the physical and mental effects of this pandemic issue. And then, of course, we need to look forward. Is there a possible of a future pandemic? And as much as none of us want to think about that, there definitely is the possibility of this having additional issues, the current pandemic, and then something in the future. Fortune magazine had this quote that I thought was great. Looking after employee physical and mental health has a cost, but effective health programs will cost less than unpreparedness. And I think we all know examples that we can attribute that quote to. So here's some ideas for you and your agency on how to promote wellness. And some of these are super obvious and common, and we're already doing them with flexible work hours. We might be offering mental health benefits, but looking at additional ones. We're going to communicate better. We're going to lead by example. Really extend some of these wellness and incentive programs to the families. That makes a huge difference in how your employee perceives your agency. really look at that sick leave policy and make sure that there's the ability to use mental health days or well-being days off, or however you want to refer to that. Offer wellness days. This is something I'm looking at for in the future, taking division by division and giving them some education on wellness programs, but then also pairing it with something fun, a fun, active activity to get your folks moving and maybe providing some healthy snacks along the way. Just like we talked about scheduling equity, we want to make sure that all employees are being treated with equal benefits. And so I have some employees that can't leave their desk for 8 hours, which means they can't use the hour of workout time awarded to them. So I want to make sure that I'm going to look at incentives that I can give them if they're not able to participate in what's being offered. When I say BOLO, be on the lookout for the stress plus moments. These jobs are stressful already, but look at the stress plus moments. Is that a diagnosis within the family? Is that a person being terminated from their unit? Things that are extra stress on top of the already stressful job that's burning them out. Encourage daily self-care and provide additional opportunities to your employees. Lastly, I think the most important thing that you can take away from this is that as the leader, the shift has to start with you. And as a leader, you have to be transparent, vulnerable, and communicate openly with your staff. They have to see daily self-care. They have to hear from you that you might have struggles and how you're addressing those, and what benefits are available to them that they can also use to do things the same way. And once you start to see your administration and your leadership leading by example, it will start to be reciprocated by your employees, and the overall culture of mental health and well-being will improve in your agency. And so I look forward to answering any questions you might have at the end of the presentation. And now I'll pass it over to Jessica for some further information.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about remote testimony. My name is Jessica Domi, and I'm an Assistant Attorney General for the Kansas Attorney General's Office. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today throughout our presentation is going to be relative to Kansas law, although I've pulled the law from a few other states on the topic specifically. But please know that if you are a scientist or a lab director in another state, please go to your state statutes or laws to know what is binding on you. Remote testimony has become a hot topic throughout the last couple of years as the pandemic really increased the ability for both judges, witnesses, and attorneys to appear via remote means. There's a lot of different programs that are out there, and I wanted to go through some of the benefits and challenges to remote testimony as lab professionals work in this area, as well as some of the statutory and constitutional framework that you must consider. More than ever, I now get asked whenever I subpoena a witness, well, can I just appear by Zoom, or can I just appear remotely? And there is a lot of considerations that go into that decision. Unfortunately, I, as a prosecutor, don't just get to make that decision. Usually I have to see if defense counsel objects or will agree, and I also have to get the court's approval before I agree to allow a witness to appear remotely. So keep that in mind when you make that request to your prosecutor or attorney that is requesting for you to testify. I think we all know what the benefits of remote testimony are. It clearly is time efficient. So if you're working and you have to appear at a court hearing, you can just click over, right, and join that Zoom hearing, be ready, testify, and be done. And then you can go back to whatever you were doing at the time. You don't have to take the time to go to the courthouse, to wait in the hallway, to be called in, which can take, hours sometimes to be able to call you to the stand. So I think for your time management, time is really one of the benefits of remote testimony. In Kansas, I have scientists from 3 major forensic science centers that travel all over the state. And so time for travel is also a big benefit, is that you don't have to drive 4 hours to appear in court for a very short time period. So that really minimizes our travel. And as we've seen throughout the pandemic, health really is a benefit in using remote testimony. Not only the health of the parties involved in the case, but also the health of the witness themselves. We're going to talk about in a little bit some cases where the witness had some health issues and was able to appear via remote testimony because of those health issues. But the health arena is really what the courts have deemed could be a good advantage of remote testimony in protecting the parties from exposure of many things, as well as the witnesses that might have some health concerns and problems, and being able to protect them as well. Your question might be, can I appear via remote testimony? And the first thing any attorney is going to do is to look at the local court rules. In Kansas, we do have a statute that permits the use of two-way electronic audiovisual communication in any court proceeding, which of course includes criminal proceedings, to one, secure the health and safety, or two, expeditiously resolve pending cases. So the Chief Justice in Kansas can decide when the statute should be utilized and has authorized this and gives them some guidelines on that. This also gives witnesses a right to ask in cases of concern, especially for COVID, where they're at risk of severe illness, for the parties at play to consider allowing them to appear remotely. The other question that would be asked is, well, is the technology available for you to do that? In many of our busier jurisdictions, there is a lot of available technology, but some in our smaller counties might not have the courtroom technology to be able to do Zoom hearings or Zoom testimony in the courtroom. And so while there's many technologies out there, sometimes it's really the court's lack of ability. Now, I will tell you, after the last couple of years of dealing with the pandemic, the courts have really opened up to this idea of utilizing video conference software platform. And so I've thrown up a few of them on the screen here: BlueJeans, Zoom, WebEx, GoToMeetings. A lot of them are the ones, and even Skype, which I think has been around even longer, are really being utilized to have this opportunity. So if the court has this technology, then it's going to increase your ability, of course, to appear by Zoom. Can you appear via remote testimony? Well, let's talk about the constitutional considerations of that, because it's not just about whether the technology is there or whether you can travel or not. It's about what the type of hearing is and whether the right to confrontation applies. So first question is, what is the type of hearing? In Kansas, we have preliminary hearings. I know a lot of states use grand juries, but we generally use our preliminary hearings. And that's our probable cause hearing to determine whether someone has committed a felony and whether that person, in fact, was committed the felony in the county in which we have filed the case. At a preliminary hearing, the right to confrontation does not attach. So usually the use of remote testimony in preliminary hearing processes is highly agreed to and allowed throughout the state of Kansas. Your state might be similar in that manner and usually use a preliminary hearing remote testimony as a matter of course. But there's a couple other hearings that I've listed here: suppression, immunity, and trial, that have confrontation rights attached to them, meaning that the defendant has a right to confront witnesses against him, and the courts has determined that forensic scientist evidence is actually testimonial in nature, so would have a confrontation right applying to it. So in these types of hearings, there's really another layer that the attorney must go through in order to approve your ability to do remote testimony. It's not just that they don't want to work with you and they don't recognize your need, but sometimes the confrontation clause would not allow it based on the circumstances of the case. In Kansas, we do allow, pursuant to statute, the laboratory report to be admitted at preliminary hearing again. Again, that's because confrontation doesn't apply there. So if you're subpoenaed for the preliminary hearing, look at your state statutes on whether you can ask for remote or even waive your appearance and just have your report admitted. But as I mentioned, the confrontation clause requires that you appear in any case or hearing that the confrontation rights are at play. Melendez-Diaz versus Massachusetts was a major Supreme Court case that came out about 13 years ago now that said that yes, the laboratory report is a testimonial piece of evidence and the defendant has a right to confrontation to a lab report. So at trial or suppression, you can't just admit the lab report. You have to have the accompanying testimony of the examiner at that time. And so if you're wanting to appear remotely for those, then there's a couple other steps that we're going to have to go through. This was upheld in Bullcoming versus New Mexico. For those of you who might be a toxicologist, this was a BAC report that was admitted without the testimony, and the court overturned it, finding that the confrontation right applied, and you must admit, or at least have the testimony of the analyst if you want to admit this against a defendant at trial. So that's kind of our background. So if confrontation does apply, what does it mean in the context of having remote testimony? Does it mean face-to-face? And the answer generally is yes. However, the courts have carved out a small exception to this general rule and said that our precedents confirm that a defendant's right to confront accusatory witnesses may be satisfied absent a physical face-to-face confrontation at trial only where denial of such confrontation is necessary to further an important public policy, and only where the reliability of testimony is otherwise assured. And that was Maryland versus Craig, which came out in 1990, but is really the Supreme Court precedent that's being used now to support the appearances of remote testimony throughout the United States, especially as the courts faced the COVID-19 pandemic. In Maryland versus Craig, they set forth the 4 elements of confrontation, and that's 1, physical presence, 2, oath, 3, cross-examination ability, and 4, the observation of demeanor by the trier of fact. So in order to satisfy the confrontation clause at a hearing, these 4 elements must be present. But what about that physical presence, right? That's the one that we're talking about when we're talking about remote testimony. I kind of set this out in a slide for you. There's no physical presence if you're remote. Even if you're appearing by video, you're not physically in that courtroom. So that's a factor that weighs against satisfying the confrontation clause. You clearly can administer an oath to someone who's appearing remotely. You clearly can have cross-examination. And the trier of fact, the judge or the jury, is going to observe their demeanor through video means if it's a live feed of that remote. So really we're talking about, like I said, the physical presence. So the question is the need for remote testimony necessary to further an important public policy? Because we know we can't satisfy all 4 elements of confrontation. This is a case-specific finding. So remember I said it has to be necessary to an important public policy, and the testimony must be otherwise reliable. So that's going to go to what is your reason for wanting to appear remote in a hearing that requires confrontation. So share that. Don't just say it's going to save me travel time. If you have a necessity that you are trying to relay in trying to appear remotely, then share that with the prosecutor. Did you just have surgery and you can't travel? Are you at high risk for for the pandemic, or is someone in your family at high risk? Have you been exposed, and are you sitting within your quarantine time? Those are kind of the examples that the courts are looking at right now. And then the attorney needs to work with you to determine if the court has readily available technology. If they do, and they can file a motion and have the court make these specific findings, then you may be able to appear by a remote testimony and satisfy 3 of those elements, but also get basically a waiver for that physical presence because of these 2 issues. I pulled out some state case law, and again, I would refer you back to your state for what your current rules are. But in Idaho, they looked at a case where the use of telephonic foundation testimony of phlebotomist violated confrontation. And what I would point to here is they didn't have the court make a case-specific finding of necessity, and it's telephonic. And I think the telephonic is problematic because you can't see the demeanor of a person appearing by phone. You can't see their body language, their face. Maybe they talk with their hands or might use some other gestures. And I think that's important for the trier of fact to determine demeanor. In Minnesota, we have a case where the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in Maryland versus Craig, which we just talked about, upheld the appearance of a special agent who testified via a web-based conferencing application due to a recent exposure to a person who tested positive for COVID. So they were in their quarantine time period, and the court made the special findings and allowed them to appear by 2-way audio video, and the court upheld that. Now, I'll note if you're in Minnesota, this is currently on review as of March of 2022. But based on the Supreme Court precedent, it looks like the court at least took into account the factors and considerations, and there's a good record for the court to take a look at that. If you're in Washington, the video testimony of 2 out-of-state witnesses based on necessity for public policy reasons in the COVID-19 pandemic did not violate the defendant's confrontation rights. So again, remote testimony was permitted in Washington in a case that was upheld in March of 2022. And then finally, I want to talk about the case out of Maryland. In Maryland, a forensic serologist testified by a Skype and WebEx at 2 different criminal trials. And the court again found that there was necessity. And based on the platform that they used, there was the ability for the witness to be sworn, to be question examined, and for them, the trier of fact, to observe the demeanor. So they upheld that in the state of Maryland. I also threw a case in here from Colorado. I apologize. It is a matter of first impression in Colorado. the use of conferencing technology in an immunity hearing was upheld due to public health concerns related to the COVID pandemic. So if you're in Colorado, you might want to take a look at the People versus Hernandez case. The final question is, okay, so if you can do it and if there's necessity, then should you do it? I think this is an important consideration for you as a laboratory scientist or a director. Sometimes in-person testimony is more effective. And so just because it might be easier to appear via remote, if you have a highly technical subject matter, just think about how you'd be able to convey that. If you have some demonstrative aids or something that could help you when you appear remotely, I think that would be great. But think about whether it's more effective than efficient when you're making the remote testimony requests. And sometimes the attorneys will help you with that. If they're having a difficult time understanding your area or know it's really important for the jury to be able to evaluate you and see you in person, then that might be something you discuss when you ask to appear remotely. Briefly, I want to go through some tips for testifying remotely. I know many of you probably have had that opportunity throughout the couple years since the pandemic started, but remember, prior to the hearing, you really need to test your equipment. Know what video conference platform your court is going to be using and make sure that's installed on your computer and that it operates, that you have a good internet connection, that your camera works and you have a good microphone or audio ability. This goes to that reliability prong of that confrontation issue, okay? So if we don't have reliable software, reliable technology to present your testimony, it's going to be overturned and disregarded. Also, set yourself up in a private, quiet room. We've seen the Zooms where people have their pets in their room and other people and kids are hopping in the room. And while those are funny for us as we're scrolling through social media, it really is not the time or the place for pets or kids in the courtroom, especially given the nature of the cases you're probably testifying on. Check your surroundings, make sure it's professional, make sure you're a professional. Don't do the party on the bottom and business on the top. Act like you're going to court. Use good lighting. Don't have anything behind you that's distracting. You want the jury to depend and look at you and not on the things on your wall or the things that are going on behind you. And then your video should show more than just your head. Again, we're talking about demeanor. So if you can do maybe waist up so that a video can show your entire demeanor as you're speaking, as if you were in the witness chair, that will help you present your testimony to a jury. During the hearing, put your actual name on your sign-in for whatever Skype or Zoom, not a pseudonym, not a nickname. Put your full name there. That's part of the record. And don't put on a video filter like the cat that we've all seen that the attorney appeared in back last year sometime. Have your exhibits ready to access, and if you're going to use demonstrative aids like I indicated earlier, have those at hand so you don't have to get up and go get those. If you're using a PowerPoint presentation to explain your testimony, have that readily available, and make sure you know how to share your screen and can share that information. If marked exhibits are going to be admitted through you, make sure you have a copy of the exact exhibit that is going to be admitted, and you can verify, yes, my exhibit, my pages are 1 through 3. I have each of them. The final page is my signature, and it's marked as Exhibit 5. Work with the attorney on that to make sure you know exactly what you're going to be asked about. Finally, don't look at anyone else. When you're testifying, look at the camera, speak directly into it. Pay attention to the questions and what is going on during the hearing. Sometimes when we're at our computers, we have a sense of getting distracted by other things. So make sure you're staying focused on what is being asked of you. And again, there might be a little delay for the video audio. So if a question's asked, wait till they're done before you answer. And if an objection is made, just like when you're in the courtroom, stop speaking, let the court rule before you proceed. I hope this has given you a little bit of information and tips and tricks on appearing remotely and when you can or should request it. If you have any questions, let me know. I have my contact information there, and I think it's time for questions for all of us.
All right. Thank you all for those great presentations. We are running pretty short on time, so I'll go ahead and just get us right into just asking each of you, if you don't mind providing what the most important takeaway that you'd like the audience to have from your presentation. I think that'll be a great way for us to all kind of wrap up here today, and I apologize for some of the audio difficulties earlier. So we'll start with Dr. Feedback. Again, if you want to just kind of give a quick little reminder of what is the most important thing you'd like the audience to take away from your part of the presentation?
Sure, I'll try to limit to just one because I kind of have two. But the first one is just make it really clear in the policy and procedure piece that the expectations, no matter what the work locations are, that it's very clear and that there's an understanding from the employee and the employer as to what is expected in terms of engagement, meetings, different things like that. The second thing is listen to your employees. I think it's important that, our employees are undergoing a lot of changes as we are, as organizations are, and it's really important to get feedback and for employees to feel safe enough to be listened to, and employee buy-in is really important in changes. So that would be all that I have.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Angie, same question. What would be the biggest takeaway for everybody?
Sure. I think what Dr. Feedback said plays into wellness as well, because the communication creates a more positive work environment, which creates happier employees. But I think the most important thing for the wellness piece is it's overwhelming to know how to start with that, especially when we're trying to figure out how to go back into the office and get back to what our new normal is going to look like. So an easy way is we're in the month of April right now, and it's Stress Awareness Month. So just take the time to start sending some information out to your employees and letting them know what's available to them, or getting feedback on what they would like to be available. Because what we know is that our employees are expecting us to provide wellness opportunities for them. And we also know that that makes a happier, more long-term employee for us. And so the more that we can provide to them and get feedback and implement those programs, the more likely we are to have a good, healthy workplace.
Awesome. Thank you. And last but not least, Jessica.
Yes, so when we discussed remote testimony, I hope everyone understands that the courts have been a little slower in their response to the pandemic and the legal ability to present that testimony remotely. So if you have those coming up and if you're wanting to appear remotely, please be patient throughout that process and understand that there's a lot of considerations. I think a lot of the attorneys and the judges clearly don't want to have a case reversed and have to retry a case, which is usually the remedy in some of those situations. So I spent some time going through the confrontation clause and what is necessary so that it's not as easy as it is maybe in other businesses and other types of settings in the courts. But they're starting to pick up. Confrontation has meant face-to-face for so long that the courts are starting to be a little progressive in allowing there to be that ability. So work with your attorney, be able to set forth those factors, and when you do appear, do it in a professional way.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. We're going to go ahead and get your contact information back up on the screen so that people can go ahead and contact you if they have any follow-up questions as we're wrapping things up. So, but before we do that, just again, want to say thank you to Dr. Feedback and Jessica, and I believe Angie had to drop off for another meeting. So thank you both, and we appreciate you taking the time to give the presentations that you all did.
Before you leave today's webinar, we ask if you could participate in a short 5-minute survey. You will see a checkbox icon directly above the chat. Simply click that button to be linked to the audience feedback survey for today's event. Your feedback about our webinars is critical information that helps us improve and continue to provide you the best webinar experience possible. If you could please take those few moments to complete the survey, we would greatly appreciate it. Lastly, across the top of the live stream window are links to all our social media profiles, including Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, a link to our website at forensiccoe.org, and a link to listen to episodes of the FTCOE's podcast, Just Science. There's also a link to sign up for the FTCOE newsletter so you can stay up to date with everything that FTCOE is doing in support of the forensic community. Thank you again for attending, and we hope everyone has a great day.